Good Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Weather on the Go, all your weather coverage. In today's weather forecast, I will be tracking a potent Alberta Clipper system to bring heavy snow this weekend across the Midwest and the Great Lakes, as well as an Arctic plunge to start the month of February with a deep freeze expected, and then a winter storm setting up next week, bringing heavy snow, a crippling ice storm, and more storms and severe weather to the deep south. Looking over the past couple of days, the past 48 hours out there, we saw that winter storm here this past week, bringing lots of heavy snow from the panhandle of Texas through Oklahoma, portions in northwestern Arkansas, even measuring to around a foot of snow just to the north and west of Little Rock, and then some heavier snow on up here into portions of downstate Illinois, Missouri, and the Ohio Valley, and that is rounding out across the northeast here with more snow later on today. But looking at your high temperatures this afternoon, we're going to be colder up to the north with that deeper snowpack. Temperatures are expected to move into the teens and 20s up here across the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest, but farther south across the immediate Gulf Coast and the Carolinas will be warming up nicely into the middle 50s here later on today, including portions there of Raleigh, getting down into Myrtle Beach, and then down into New Orleans as well, getting to around 55 degrees later on today. But looking back up to the north this afternoon, we got those pesky snow showers still out there across the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and interior New England, bringing some additional snowfall accumulation to some of these areas. In fact, we could be piling up a couple more inches of snow across the Chicagoland area, getting down into northern Indiana, southwestern portions of Michigan, and then some heavier amounts of 2 to 3 inches perhaps getting closer towards the Lake Erie shoreline into northeastern Ohio later on today through that Friday night time frame. And then looking up across portions of the Northeast, that snowstorm that is exiting Maine could be dropping several more inches of snow later on today through Friday night. And then those pesky snow showers around the Great Lakes regions here could be adding up to a few more inches, especially up here toward Buffalo, Watertown, New York, and then getting down the spine of the Appalachians here. A good 3 to 6 more inches of snow can be expected from now through Friday night. But if you guys are with me on this video, definitely don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the like button. It helps to get all of this weather information out to more and more people, and you get all of my daily weather forecast updates on this channel. I cover Canada, the United States, and the tropics, so make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and that like button down below the video to get all of this weather information out to more and more people and for my daily weather forecast updates. But going ahead to tomorrow on Friday, January 27th, we're going to see another system, a Clipper system dropping down through the western Great Lakes, maybe a couple more inches of snow here into the UP of Michigan, Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and northern Illinois. But then a more potent Alberta Clipper system will start to dive out of Alberta into southwestern Saskatchewan into the Pacific Northwest throughout the day on Friday, bringing snow here into Montana, Idaho, and western portions of Wyoming. In fact, the jet stream is very powerful down here to the south. We got that cross-polar flow starting to move in with that northwesterly flow aloft. By the time we get into Friday, January 27th, with that strong subtropical jet still evident across the southeastern United States. But by the time we get in towards tomorrow evening around 6 o'clock, we'll see that potent Alberta Clipper system start to drop out of Canada across Montana into Wyoming and Idaho, bringing some moderate to heavier snow across these areas. That will move eastward and east-southeastward through the day on Saturday into the sunrise time frame around 6, 7 o'clock. We'll be spreading out some snow in a narrow band here into northern and northeastern Nebraska, South Dakota, and getting into north central Iowa. That will kick its way on eastward here toward eastern Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin here all the way through the day on Saturday into the overnight hours, getting into Sunday morning, and some of that will be spreading eastward toward the Detroit and Toronto areas as well. Farther south, though, all rain across portions of the Arklatex into the mid-Mississippi Valley here because the temperatures will be so warm. But this system is going to have plenty of saturation with it. We're going to have lots of that mid-level juice that we need for that heavier snow to set up here in a narrow swath across the upper Midwest and the western Great Lakes. And again, narrow swath is the key word, because any shift, your subtle shift in this 50 to 100 miles north or south, could mean the difference between no snow and potentially up to 6 inches worth of snow in some of these areas going through that Friday through Sunday time frame here through this weekend. And this looks to set up right now across northeastern Nebraska, southern South Dakota, through portions of central Iowa, including the Des Moines region, getting across northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, including especially the northern suburbs of Chicago in through Milwaukee, and then that will spread over toward Detroit and portions of Kalamazoo, Michigan through the weekend time frame. But farther to the south, like I was mentioning, heavier rainfall with warmer temperatures will be moving in across the Arklatex and the mid-Mississippi Valley through that Saturday the 28th and Sunday the 29th time frame. We could be adding up some decent rains down here into places like Texarkana, getting up toward Little Rock and the Memphis area. We could be adding up another 1 to perhaps 2 inches worth of rain during that 24 to 48 hour period. And that does raise the concern for at least some flash flooding potential during that period, with a marginal threat for flash flooding across East Texas, Louisiana, getting in through the Arkansas region here into northwestern Mississippi and far southwestern Tennessee during that weekend period. But it's all about the true Arctic air as we push in toward early February. This is going to be a strong push of Arctic air from Canada, and this will go all the way south toward the southern plains as we get toward that last week here in January and getting into early February, at least through February 4th. And there is a high probability of some very cold temperatures up here across the Dakotas, Montana, getting into the Twin Cities here, including portions of Minnesota, getting back down into Iowa, Nebraska, and parts of Kansas, including the Kansas City area as well, going through that time frame. And even that moderate risk for those hazardously cold temperatures getting farther south toward the Red River as we go through that first full week in February. So looking at this with the temperature anomalies starting on Sunday, January 29th, we are going to see these deeper purples showing up. That's at least 15 to 20 degrees colder than we should be this time of year. With that ridge across the East Coast, we'll have temperatures initially this weekend on Sunday, a good 10 to 20 degrees above normal. But watch as we go into Tuesday, we'll start to see some of this colder weather transfer farther south and east with time into early on next week here on Tuesday, January 31st. And again, another 10, 20 degrees below normal all across portions of Canada and much of the north central and western United States during this period. And looking at the potential high temperatures on Sunday, January 29th, we're going to be going below zero all across southern Canada here from Quebec on back to the west across Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and even over here into British Columbia as well. But even across the northern United States, it's not a picnic here either. We got zero temperatures here up to the north, and even minus single digits up here into portions of the Dakotas, getting into Minnesota here, and especially back into Montana and Wyoming. That freezing line is moving farther south into portions of northern Oklahoma and the Missouri Valley and the northern Ohio Valley during this time. Potential wind chills could be getting down to around 20 to 30 degrees below zero, especially into the Dakotas here in the upper Midwest. And then those 40 below zero temperatures with those wind chills out there could be felt across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and portions of Quebec, Canada, and in Ontario, Canada, as we get through that Sunday time frame. And then by the time we get into early next week on Tuesday, January 31st, we'll see more of that cold air settling in across the lower 48 in southern Canada, with that freezing line approaching the Red River there in Texas and Oklahoma, and then moving across portions of Kentucky with that freezing line during that time frame. And again, those wind chills will be brutal out there, 10, 20, even 30 degrees below zero, especially on up here over the upper Midwest and southern Canada, especially with that deeper snowpack across those regions. And just to show you an average number of days with wind chills at least to 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit here, of at least an hour or more, up here across northern Minnesota and into North Dakota and a small sliver here of northeastern South Dakota, on average we see 28 to 56 days with wind chills down close to 10 to 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit here. on any given winter. And especially as you go farther south into Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas, the days go a little bit less, but still on average in Kansas, parts of Missouri here, southern Illinois, and Indiana, we see 3 to 7 days of at least those 20 degrees below zero wind chills during any given winter. So that is something to note as well, but also very active during this period. We're going to see more action across the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast, more rain and snow off here to Washington State, Oregon, and Northern California, and then that will transfer downstream across the eastern United States with that active subtropical jet during that period. We're going to have a positively tilted trough starting to dig down far, far south. This is Southern California and the Baja of California here as well, getting into early next week. That will move its way on east towards the northwestern side of Texas on Thursday, February 2nd, and this could spell trouble with that positively tilted trough. It's not going to be moving very fast. So we're going to see a overrunning setup with lots of ice, lots of heavy snow, and even some heavier rain down here across the southern plains and the Arklatex region. And with that temperature gradient here, we're going to be concerned about some icing as well and heavy snow with those low level temperatures in the 850 millibar layer around, 10 to 15 degrees Celsius here below zero. That will transfer to temperatures at the surface or near the surface that could be in the mid and upper 20s and near 30 degrees down here, especially into the panhandle of Texas, northwestern Texas, and getting in toward the Red River here towards Oklahoma. And looking at this setup, it is a very favorable for freezing rain, sleet, and snow with this setup here. Of course, with snow falls through the cold air very easily from the cloud all the way to the ground. Sleet, you have the frozen precipitation that melts in the shallow warm air aloft, and then you have it refreeze into sleet before reaching the surface. But then that dangerous setup with the crippling ice, with the freezing rain, you have the frozen precipitation that melts with the warm air aloft, and then you have the shallow cold air underneath just above the surface. And then it freezes on contact with that rainfall here as freezing rain. And then, of course, rainfall here, it's very warm from the top down. So we're definitely seeing that going into early next week. On Tuesday, January 31st, we could be breaking out with some snow, heavy, wet snow across southeastern Kansas, getting into northern Oklahoma. But around the Oklahoma City area, getting up toward Tulsa, we have to watch out for that sleet, freezing rain potential. It does look to be all rain for the DFW Metroplex, primarily on Tuesday. But by the time we stretch into the middle of next week on Wednesday, February 1st, we'll see more of a crippling ice setup across portions of north central Texas and then the northwestern side of there back toward Lubbock and Amarillo. We could be talking about heavier snow, and then it'll be very, very close here with the rain or the freezing rain line towards that Fort Worth and Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area on Wednesday. Then by the time we get into Thursday, again, that ice potential with snow will still remain across Texas, the Red River, and getting into southern Oklahoma during that time frame. We could be dropping some heavy snow early next week. We could be talking about snowfall amounts over 6 inches across many of these areas. In fact, some double-digit snows are possible across Lubbock, Midland, Texas, and then getting up here toward Wichita Falls early next week. And a crippling ice storm is definitely possible. Again, this is one model run, but it does show you there is potential of a quarter to even a half inch or more of ice across portions of central, north Texas, and then getting up here towards portions of the Arklatex early to middle portion of next week. And then as we get towards next weekend, an interesting setup for the East Coast potentially with that polar jet moving farther south and that subtropical jet phasing together at times. We will be seeing a storm system start to develop across portions of the Tennessee Valley with a low pressure system somewhere across middle Tennessee or northern Alabama. Primarily rainfall with this on Friday, February 3rd, late next week. But watch as it starts to move northeast. That cold air wraps around the backside of this, and we could be seeing our first decent snow of the year up here towards Baltimore, getting up into portions of Ohio, portions of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then down through West Virginia and the portions of northern Virginia, and maybe some icing potential across the western Carolinas that we'll have to watch in towards next weekend. And also the heavy rainfall across the southeast. We could be adding up some decent rains from Friday through Saturday on the 3rd and 4th here, and going into Sunday morning on February 5th as well. We could be adding up another 2 to 4 inches or more of rain across Tennessee, the Carolinas, and Georgia here, and farther south toward Florida during that period. And again, looking at the potential snow into next weekend, again, the placement of this is a little uncertain. A lot of these weather models are going back and forth on the placement here. This could be farther west by a few hundred miles, or this could be farther east here and towards portions of the mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. But generally, a decent snow somewhere across portions of the Missouri Valley, eastward toward the mid-Atlantic and the East Coast, getting in toward next weekend. But then it looks like we thaw out just a little bit, getting into the second week in February through February 15th. We'll thaw out a little bit. Just because you see red and oranges on here does not mean we're going to be skyrocketing into the 80s. It just means that compared to climatology of how warm you are this time of year, we'll be slightly above average going in toward that second week in February. Also looks pretty active across the center of the country, from the Texas area here into portions of the southern plains and on up through the Illinois Valley and the Great Lakes through that February 8th and February 15th time frame. And it looks like we'll have those classic Texas hook type low pressure systems develop along the Red River and then curling up through the Ohio Valley with heavier snow, maybe a crippling ice event there as well into the second week in February, with more stormy weather and perhaps some severe weather across the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, and the Southeast that we know all too well about as we get into the second week in February. So to recap my forecast, a potent Alberta Clipper system will be moving through this weekend across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes with heavy snow. Arctic plunge to start the month of February here of 2023 with lots of cold air and that deep freeze out there. And then the winter storm setup is appearing more likely next week with heavy snow, a crippling ice storm, and more storms, possibly some severe weather at times as we go through next week. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I definitely appreciate it. Remember to like the video down below, give it a thumbs up, leave any comments, questions, and concerns below. I'll get to those later on today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new, and hit the notification bell to get all of my daily weather forecast updates on this channel. Have a great Thursday, everybody, a great rest of your week, and I will see you all in the next video.